like machines are for sissies. Real men use a 3-corner file. Hey guys, it's Chris at Highline Guitars and you're watching another one of my YouTube guitar building videos. If you're new to the channel, welcome. I hope that by the end of this video, you'll consider subscribing. What I'm going to be talking about in today's episode is the last bit of work that I need to do to finish my headless headstock guitar that I've been working on. And in the last episode, I finished making the nut and I did some work to establish the string action, which was a bit of a challenge. So we're ready now to proceed with the next steps, and what that's going to entail is leveling the frets. But before I do that, I'm going to test play the guitar just to get an idea of how much work I'm going to need to do. Now typically when I test play a guitar, what I'll do is I'll play each string at each fret all the way up the fretboard. And I'll play each note and let it ring for a few seconds to get an idea of whether or not there's going to be any sort of string buzz. Now, oftentimes when I do this and I hear string buzz, I can quickly isolate which fret is causing the string buzz. And if it isn't too severe, what I can do is just mark that fret. Then after I'm done, I can loosen and remove the strings and then just do some spot leveling, spot recrowning, and then string the guitar back up and test it again just to see if I've solved the issue. However, in reality, most of the time, it's just easier to remove the strings and then level all the frets using a fret leveling beam. And that's often because it's difficult to isolate the fret buzz due to the fact that there may be multiple frets that are having issues. And sometimes with spot leveling, if you're not careful, you can go too far and spoil the work. So the first thing I'll do is just I'll play each string all the way up the fretboard. And I'll continue on, and then I'll move to the next string. See, I'm hearing some buzz right there, which sounds like it's probably the 3rd fret. Yeah, there's that buzz again. Ooh, it's really bad there. But see, it goes away when I hit the 3rd fret, so I know that the 3rd fret is the high one. But overall, it's not too bad. And another thing I like to do as well is I'll bend the strings. I'll play it and bend it, both up and down. And I'll do that with each string at each fret. And this doesn't really take that long to do. It may seem kind of tedious, but it really gives me a good idea of the condition of the frets and how much work I'm going to have to do. And a lot of times that's what's going to dictate the grit of the sandpaper that I'm going to use on my leveling beam. And in this case, it's not that significant. And even though these are stainless steel frets, I'll probably start with a 320 grit sandpaper on my beam to start leveling. Okay, so I've got the guitar back on the bench. I've loosened and removed the strings to get those out of the way. And what I need to do now is I need to use my trusty notched precision straight edge to make sure that the fretboard is absolutely level before I level the frets. Now, some folks are going to say, shouldn't you level the frets with the neck under simulated string tension? There's, an argument for that, but I've found in my experience that it's better to level the fretboard first before you level the frets. And the reason for that is one of the reasons why we will induce a little bit of neck relief on a guitar where it has a slight amount of up bow is because it reduces string buzz. So if your guitar has a little bit of string buzz, you can adjust the truss rod to induce some relief, which is usually measured at the 8th or 9th fret. And that's because at the 8th or 9th fret, that part of the neck is below the ends. It's kind of a U shape. And by doing that, you're slightly raising the action, but you're eliminating the potential for string buzz. Everywhere you press a fret down or a string down to the fret, the string is higher off the next fret up, so it's not going to have the potential to buzz. Well, some luthiers think that you should simulate that relief before you level the frets. However, if you level the fretboard, what you're doing is you're increasing the potential for string buzz. So if you can fix it on a level fretboard, when it gets back to having a little bit of relief after you've strung up the guitar and tuned it, or even adjusted the truss rod, it's going to be in an even better state. That gives you some leeway. So if you change strings to a different gauge, or more importantly, change to a different tuning, you're not going to start to get that string buzz back because you leveled the frets when the fretboard was level. Fret work is dirty work. So if you want to keep your fretboard clean, it's a good idea to mask it off before you start messing it up. Okay, the fretboard is now masked off, so what I'm going to do next is I am going to mark the top of the frets with a red Sharpie. It has to be a red Sharpie. Red Sharpies will give you the best tone and sustain. All right, so I've got my sanding beam here, and I've got 320 grit on this side, 220 on this side. You'll also notice that I still have the nut here. The nut's glued in. I don't really need to remove it. If you sand like a maniac, then you probably would want to remove it. Otherwise, the end of your beam is going to slam into it. But I'm pretty careful about that. Now, the sanding stroke that I use is going to remain parallel to the center line of the neck. I'm not going to follow the taper. I'm just going to follow that center line. That keeps the radius of the fret wire truer to the radius of the fretboard. And then I'll just gradually move it back and forth. And I will check my progress, and I'm already starting to remove most of the red Sharpie from the center area. Now, when using a sanding beam like this one, and I believe this is about 16 or 18 inches in length, at any rate, most of the sanding action happens towards the center, with about half as much happening at either end. And that's because as you're moving the beam back and forth, these frets in here are constantly covered, whereas the frets at this end are only covered half as much as you're sanding. So you're actually removing more material from this end than you would be from this end. And one way to prevent that from happening would be to use a beam that's longer than the length of your fretboard. But that's kind of hard to do, and in fact, I haven't seen any. You'd probably have to have one custom made to do it. Also, in this situation, I still have the nut in place as well as my pickups, and that kind of limits the range that I can move the beam back and forth. So knowing that this beam is removing most of the material from here, I can just switch to a shorter beam. This one's like 8 inches long, and then I can just focus just in this area or just in this area. And that's how you get the frets level consistently and evenly from one end to the other and from side to side. Now, another thing I'll do is I will check my progress with a fret rocker. Now, fret rockers, you got to be kind of careful with them because you can get some inaccurate readings with them. For one thing, like this fret rocker in particular, it's about 1/8 of an inch thick. It's stainless steel. So you have to be careful about how you lay it down onto the frets. If it's at an angle, you can get an inaccurate reading. So you want to make sure it's laying with that surface flat onto the tops of the frets as you move it across to get that accurate reading. And I think I have now got all of these frets level. But I will check the entire length of this fretboard, checking in 3 or 4 spots as I go. Okay, so I got the frets all nice and level, and what I'm ready to do now is to recrown them. And before I do that, I'm going to mark the tops once again with my red Sharpie. And that way I can use the red line that I'm drawing on here to gauge my progress as I form the new crown. Okay, now as far as crowning tools are concerned, I have used so many different kinds of different styles of fret crowning tools. I've got the sort of the U-shaped toothed crowning tools, diamond crowning tools, and I recently picked up these StewMac. These are really cool because they're small, they're easy to use. They come in 150 or 300 grit. They have different size V-grooves on each side. Now these do work pretty well. The nice thing about them is they cut in both directions and they don't leave scratches that are very severe. The tool marks are pretty easy to remove. However, I still keep reaching back for my 3-corner file because I can get a fast crown that is perfectly shaped with this file. I've been using it for years, and it's just been a reliable way of doing it. So I think a lot of these different kind of tools they're kind of gimmicky. You can try them if you want, but once you've mastered the use of a 3-corner file, they just work really, really well. And what I'm doing is I'm trying to file just the size of the fret, forming that round over, leaving just a very thin strip of that red Sharpie running right down the center. So as I file, I can watch it gradually get thinner and thinner. In this view, I'm using a 3-corner file to form the crown. And as you watch closely, take notice of how I rotate the file over the top, but I don't go completely over the top center line. I just keep it on the sides, and that's how I get a nice uniform rounded crown. Now here's a top-down view, and if you look closely, you'll see that that Sharpie mark is getting thinner gradually with each pass. And then this is how the StewMac Z file works. It's basically about the same speed and roughly the same quality of crown. Now here's that same top-down view as I'm filing with this StewMac Z file. Watch as that red Sharpie mark gets thinner. After recrowning, it's time to dress the ends of the frets, and for this one I'm going to be rounding over the fret ends using just a simple StewMac fret end dressing file. The technique is fairly simple. It's just a matter of adjusting the angle as I file the end of the fret, and that achieves that kind of rounded appearance. With all the filing work done, I'm now ready to sand out the file marks, and to do that I'm using this simple tool that I created out of a piece of aluminum. At one end it has a groove that's been filed into the edge, and what I'll do is I'll wrap that with a piece of sandpaper, and I like to use the 3M sticky backed sandpaper. It's the same stuff I use on my fret leveling beam, but I'll start with like a 320 grit, and then I'll move up to 400, then 600, 800. I'll go as high as 1,000 grit. Well guys, I think that's all the time I've got for this episode. I was hoping to finish this fretwork by sanding out the tool marks and then bringing them up to a nice polish. However, that's going to have to wait till the next episode, which will be part 15. So be sure to check that out. In the meantime though, before you go, click that thumbs up button down below if you enjoyed this video. If you don't subscribe but like this sort of content, make sure you hit that subscribe button. And of course, if you'd like to help support my channel, which is always important, you can visit my YouTube merch shelf down below and purchase plans for a guitar or the tools that we use to build guitars. And I got some cool t-shirts for sale as well. You can also click that little thanks button down below and leave a tip in the amount that you choose. So until the next episode, take care, stay safe, and I'll see you soon.